It was a Friday night at one of the most expensive hotels in the city. The restaurant was full of wealthy guests dressed in designer clothes, talking about business and politics while soft music played in the background. The air smelled of fresh roses and expensive wine. Waiters moved quickly between tables, carrying silver trays and smiling politely even when their feet hurt. Among them was a young waitress named Clara. She had been working double shifts for weeks trying to save enough money to pay for her mother's medicine and her younger brother's school fees. She was tired, but she never let it show. Her smile was gentle, and her voice always calm when she spoke to customers. That night was special because the hotel was hosting a private dinner for one of the country's most powerful businessmen, Mr. Rowland. Everyone in the staff knew his name. He was rich, confident, and known for being impatient. Whenever he visited, everyone felt nervous. The manager had spent all day making sure everything was perfect. The lights, the menu, even the flowers on the tables. Nothing could go wrong. At least that's what they hoped. The event began smoothly. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, and the pianist played light tunes that floated across the hall. But halfway through the evening, the pianist received a phone call and whispered something to the manager before quietly leaving. Moments later, the music stopped. The sudden silence made the whole room pause. For a few seconds, no one said anything, and then the deep voice of Mr. Rowland broke the quiet. "Why has the music stopped?" he said, his tone sharp. "This is supposed to be a classy evening." The manager hurried over to explain that the pianist had a family emergency and had to leave, but Rowland was not pleased. He sighed loudly and looked around the room with irritation. "Do I have to pay thousands of dollars for dinner and sit in silence?" he said, shaking his head. The guests chuckled awkwardly, unsure of what to say. Clara was standing a few tables away, holding a tray with empty glasses. She could feel her heart race. She hated scenes like this, moments where someone used their power to embarrass others. She lowered her eyes, hoping not to draw attention. But fate had other plans. As she turned to walk back toward the kitchen, her shoe caught the edge of a rug. The tray wobbled and 2 glasses tipped over, landing with a sharp crash. Everyone turned toward the sound. The room went quiet again. Roland's eyes narrowed as he looked at her. "Well," he said coldly, "at least someone is making noise now." The guests laughed lightly, but Clara felt her cheeks burn. She bent down to pick up the broken glass, whispering apologies. The manager rushed over to help her, but Rowland wasn't done. "Tell me, young lady," he said loudly, "do you know how to do anything other than spill wine?" Clara froze. She looked up, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, sir," she said softly. "It was an accident." Rowland leaned back in his chair. "I'm sure it was," he said. "Do you play any instruments, or are you just good at serving tables?" His tone was mocking, and the laughter from nearby guests stung even more. Clara hesitated before answering. "I used to play the piano," she said quietly. Rowland raised an eyebrow. "Used to? How interesting. Then maybe you can help us. Since our pianist left, perhaps you can entertain us instead." The guests laughed again, thinking it was a joke, but Rowland wasn't smiling. "Go on," he said, pointing to the grand piano in the corner. "Let's see if you actually can." Clara's heart sank. She hadn't touched a piano in years. The thought of playing in front of so many people, rich, powerful, judgmental people, made her stomach twist. "Sir, I don't think she began, but Rowland cut her off. "I insist," he said, his voice firm. "If you're as capable as you say, show us." The manager tried to step in, whispering to Rowland that this wasn't appropriate, but Rowland waved him off. "It's fine," he said. "We're all here to enjoy ourselves. Let's see what she can do." Everyone's eyes were now on Clara. Some looked curious, others amused. A few even took out their phones, ready to record what they thought would be an embarrassing scene. Clara stood still for a few seconds, her mind spinning. She could refuse, but she might lose her job. She could try, but what if she failed and everyone laughed at her? She closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. When she finally walked toward the piano, the sound of her footsteps echoed in the room. The lights reflected softly on the polished surface of the instrument. She sat down, her hands resting on her lap for a moment. Her fingers felt cold. She looked at the keys and memories flooded back. Her small childhood home, her father teaching her how to play, his gentle voice saying, "Music isn't about skill. Clara, it's about feeling." She pressed one key gently. The sound was soft, trembling, uncertain. A few people chuckled quietly. Roland smirked, leaning back in his chair, clearly expecting her to embarrass herself. But Clara ignored them. She tried again, pressing another key, then another. The melody came slowly, awkwardly, like a forgotten language she was trying to remember. Her fingers moved stiffly at first, searching for the rhythm. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, waiting for her to make a mistake. But as she played a few more notes, something inside her began to shift. The sound grew smoother. Her breathing slowed. She wasn't in the restaurant anymore. She was back in her living room, sitting next to her father, his hand guiding hers on the keys. She remembered the warmth in his eyes when she got it right. She remembered how music had made their tiny home feel full of light. Her hands moved faster now, more confidently. The melody began to take shape. The guests who had been whispering and smirking started to fall silent. Even Roland, who had been sipping his wine with a smug look, lowered his glass slightly. The tune carried something raw, something honest. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Clara's eyes stayed closed as she played. Her body moved gently with the rhythm. Every note seemed to carry a memory. Her father's laughter, her mother's tired smile, the sound of rain against the window. The song began to grow, becoming deeper, fuller. It filled every corner of the room, washing away the tension and noise. By the time she reached the final notes, the entire restaurant was silent. Not a single fork clinked against a plate. Even the staff had stopped moving, watching her with quiet amazement. The last chord lingered in the air like a whisper before fading away. Clara opened her eyes slowly. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The room felt different, softer. Then she realized everyone was staring at her. She stood up, her heart pounding, and looked around nervously. And then suddenly someone began to clap. It started with one pair of hands, then another, until the entire room erupted in applause. Some people even stood up, cheering. Clara stood there frozen, unsure what to do. Her hands were still trembling, but now it wasn't fear. It was something else. Relief, gratitude, pride. Roland was the last to clap. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then in a calm voice he said, "I stand corrected." His tone was different now, no longer mocking. He looked at her for a long moment before adding, "You play beautifully." Clara didn't know what to say. She simply nodded and gave a small smile before quietly walking back toward the kitchen. The other waiters looked at her in awe, whispering words of praise. She felt her chest tighten with emotion, her eyes stinging slightly, but she held it together. For the first time in years, she felt something she had almost forgotten, pride in herself. In the back room, she sat down on a small wooden bench, her hands still shaking from the performance. She took a deep breath and smiled faintly. For one brief moment, her world had stopped spinning. All her worries, all her exhaustion had disappeared into that song. And even though she didn't know what would happen next, she knew that something inside her had awakened again, something she thought she had lost forever. The restaurant was quieter than usual the next morning. The story of the waitress who played the piano had already begun to spread among the hotel staff. Some had recorded small clips on their phones, and those videos were being shared quietly among employees and a few guests. Everyone was still talking about how Clara had silenced the entire room with her song. But Clara herself didn't think much of it. She just wanted to get through another day, serve her tables, and make sure no one made a big deal out of what had happened. When she arrived for her shift, the head waiter gave her a small smile. "You're kind of famous around here now," he said jokingly. Clara laughed shyly. "Please don't say that. I don't want any attention." But attention was exactly what she was getting. Some guests recognized her from the night before and asked if she was the one who played the piano. Every time someone mentioned it, she felt a mix of pride and embarrassment. She didn't play for applause. She had played because she had no choice. It had been a moment of fear that turned into something she couldn't explain. As the day went on, she noticed something unusual. The manager, who was always strict, seemed to be watching her more carefully than usual. Not in a bad way, more like he was thinking about something. In the afternoon, he called her into his office. The small office smelled like coffee and paper, and Clara stood nervously by the door. "Clara," he began, "last night, that was something none of us expected." "You were incredible. Thank you, sir," she said quietly. He smiled and leaned back in his chair. Mr. Rowland sent a message this morning. He asked about you. Clara's eyes widened. He did? Yes, the manager nodded. He said he was impressed and wanted to know if you've had any musical training. Clara felt her throat tighten. I used to a long time ago. My father taught me when I was little. The manager nodded slowly. Well, he asked if you might be willing to play again this weekend. He's hosting another dinner here. Clara blinked. Me? Play again? Yes, he specifically requested you. She didn't know what to say. The memory of being forced to play still made her uneasy. But she also remembered the silence in that room, the way people had listened, the way her music had made them stop and feel. She had never experienced anything like that before. Part of her wanted to hide, but another part wanted to see what would happen if she played again, on her own terms this time. I'll think about it, she said softly. The manager nodded. Take your time. Whatever you decide, you made us proud. That evening after work, Clara walked home through the cool night air. Her apartment was small but cozy. Her mother was sitting by the window, knitting slowly while her brother did homework on the floor. When Clara came in, they both smiled. Her brother looked up. Mom showed me the video. You were amazing. Clara laughed. You saw that? Everyone saw it. My teacher even asked if it was really you. Her mother looked up from her knitting. You played beautifully, dear. Your father would have been proud. Clara sat beside her and smiled sadly. I just wish he could have heard it. They talked for a while, and when everyone went to bed, Clara stayed up, staring at the small photo of her father on the shelf. He had been a music teacher before he passed away, and their house had always been full of melodies. After his death, the piano was sold to cover hospital bills. She hadn't touched one since until last night. She whispered softly, I didn't forget, Dad. The next few days passed quietly, but something inside Clara began to change. Every time she passed the piano in the hotel, she felt drawn to it. Sometimes, when no one was around, she would sit and play for a few minutes. The notes made her feel alive again. She remembered songs her father taught her, and she even began to hum new melodies, ones she had never written down. By Friday, she made her decision. She told the manager she would play at the dinner. He was thrilled and promised to let Rowland know. The evening came faster than she expected. This time she wasn't a nervous waitress being forced into it. She wore a simple black dress the staff had helped her borrow from the hotel's costume storage. Her hair was tied neatly, and her hands, though trembling slightly, felt ready. As the guests arrived, Clara stayed near the piano. The atmosphere was similar to the last time, elegant, loud, full of laughter. Rowland entered with his usual confidence. When he saw her, he smiled, a polite but genuine smile. Ah, the star of the night, he said. I'm glad you agreed to play again. Clara smiled back politely. Thank you for inviting me, sir. He nodded. You have something special. Don't waste it. Then he walked to his table, leaving her to prepare. When it was time, the lights dimmed slightly and Clara began to play. But this time it was different. She wasn't afraid. The melody was calm, hopeful, like a quiet sunrise after a long storm. Her fingers danced across the keys with grace. The guests listened silently, caught by the same magic that had filled the room before. Rowland watched her with deep thought. For the first time in years, he looked less like a man of power and more like someone remembering something he'd lost. The music touched something in him too. Maybe it reminded him of someone or some time when life had been simpler. When she finished, the applause came again, but softer this time, more respectful. Rowland stood and clapped once, nodding to her. Beautiful, he said. Afterward, he approached her as the guests mingled. Where did you learn to play like that? He asked. Clara smiled shyly. My father taught me. He believed that music could heal people. Rowland looked at her for a long moment. He was right, he said quietly. For a moment, I forgot everything else. He paused before continuing. I have a piano in my home that hasn't been played in years. I'd like you to come by one day just to play. No audience, just music. Clara hesitated, unsure what to say. That's very kind, sir, but... He interrupted gently. You don't have to decide now. Think about it. Then he walked away, leaving her standing there with 1,000 thoughts spinning in her mind. That night, when she returned home, she couldn't sleep. She kept hearing the melody she had played and the sound of the applause that followed. She thought about Rowland's words. Don't waste it. She had never thought of music as anything more than a memory. But maybe it could be more. Maybe it was her way forward. The next morning, when she arrived at work, the manager told her something unexpected. Mr. Rowland called again. He wants to sponsor your music lessons. Clara stared at him. What? He said he knows a teacher who trains classical musicians. He's willing to pay for your classes if you agree. Clara didn't know how to react. It felt too big, too unreal.
Why would he do that for me?
The manager shrugged. Maybe he saw something in you that you don't see yet. That evening, Clara walked to a small park near her home. The sun was setting and the air was cool. She sat on a bench and listened to the distant sound of a street musician playing guitar. The tune was simple but beautiful. People walked past without paying much attention, but she sat there smiling. She understood that feeling, the quiet joy of playing for no reason other than love. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Maybe it's time to start again." For the first time in a long while, she felt hope rising inside her. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew one thing. She wouldn't let fear hold her back anymore. She would play again, not because someone forced her to, but because it was who she was. And maybe, just maybe, that one song was only the beginning of something much bigger waiting for her. The following week felt different for Clara. The restaurant still buzzed with the same noise of plates clinking and people chatting, but her world had quietly changed. She walked through the hotel hallways with a new sense of calm. Every time she passed the piano, she couldn't help but touch one or two keys, letting the soft sound remind her of what had happened. The memory of that night still played in her mind like a dream. She could still see the faces of the guests when the music stopped, the silence that followed, and Mr. Rowland's words that stayed with her. Don't waste it. It was strange to think that a man like him, someone who lived in luxury, who had probably never worried about paying bills or skipping meals, could say something that actually meant something to her. She had spent so much of her life believing no one noticed people like her, but now someone had, and that small moment had opened a door she didn't even know existed. 2 days later, the manager called her into his office again. His tone was warm, almost excited. "Clara," Mr. Rowland confirmed it. "He's arranged for you to meet a piano teacher this weekend. Her name is Mrs. Lang, one of the most respected instructors in the city." "He's already paid for your lessons." Clara stood frozen. "He already paid?" she asked softly. The manager nodded. "Yes, all you have to do is show up. He said you can take as many lessons as you need and he'll handle the rest." It felt surreal. She didn't know whether to cry or laugh. "I don't even know how to thank him," she whispered. The manager smiled kindly. "Maybe by playing your heart out." That Saturday, she took the train to the address she'd been given. It was a quiet street lined with tall trees, their leaves golden under the autumn sun. When she reached the small music studio, she stopped for a moment, taking a deep breath before going inside. The faint sound of piano music drifted through the hall, graceful and perfect. She felt nervous again, like a child starting school for the first time. Inside, a woman in her late 50s greeted her with a smile. "You must be Clara," she said warmly. "Mr. Rowland told me you have a natural gift." Clara blushed. "I don't know about that. I just play from memory." Mrs. Lang nodded thoughtfully. "That's often where the real magic comes from. Let's see what you can do." She led Clara to a grand piano in the center of the room. The keys gleamed under the soft light. For a moment, Clara hesitated, her fingers hovering just above them. But when she started to play, all the nervousness faded away. The sound filled the room gently, every note carrying her feelings like a whisper. She played one of her old tunes, simple but full of emotion. When she finished, Mrs. Lang smiled. "You play with your soul," she said. "That's something you can't teach. But I can help you shape it, polish it, and make your music reach more hearts." From that day, Clara began her lessons. Every weekend, she practiced for hours, sometimes losing track of time. Her fingertips would ache, but her heart felt alive. Mrs. Lang was patient and encouraging, guiding her through classical pieces and teaching her how to read music again. Slowly, Clara began to remember what it felt like to truly belong to music. Back at the hotel, she still worked her regular shifts, but her co-workers could see a new glow in her. She hummed softly while setting tables, smiled more often, and sometimes stayed late just to play for herself after everyone had gone home. Guests passing by would stop to listen, even if only for a few minutes. Some would leave small notes of thanks on the piano, saying how her music had made their night better. One evening, as she finished playing, the manager approached her. "Clara," he said, "Mr. Roland will be hosting a charity event here next month. He specifically asked if you would perform again." Clara's heart skipped a beat. "A charity event?" "Yes," he said. "It's a big one. Important people from all over the city will be here." The thought of playing for so many people again made her nervous, but deep down, she felt ready. This time she wanted to play because she wanted to, not because someone told her to. "Tell him I'll do it," she said with a small smile. The following weeks passed in a blur of work and practice. Mrs. Lang helped her prepare a piece that would truly move the audience. "Play something that tells your story," she advised. "Something only you can express." Clara took those words to heart. Every evening after work, she stayed late in the restaurant trying to compose something new, something that spoke of her life, her struggles, and her hope. The melody came slowly, growing from quiet sadness into soft strength. It was a song about finding light after darkness, about standing tall after being pushed down. The night of the charity event finally arrived. The restaurant was transformed with soft lights, elegant decorations, and guests in shimmering clothes. The air buzzed with laughter and polite conversation. Roland was there too, greeting guests with his usual confidence. But when he saw Clara walking toward the piano, his expression softened. She wore a simple white dress, borrowed again from the hotel's collection, but she looked radiant. Her hair framed her face, and there was calm determination in her eyes. The murmurs in the room faded as she sat at the piano. For a few seconds, she didn't move. She just closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then she began to play. The music started softly, almost like a whisper. The first notes floated through the air, gentle and pure. As the melody grew, it told a story without words, of fear, loss, courage, and quiet victory. The rhythm carried her emotions, and the guests could feel it. Some leaned forward, unable to look away. Others closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Roland stood at the back of the room, listening silently. The song brought back memories he hadn't visited in years. The sound of his late wife's piano, the warmth of their home before success made him distant. He realized then that this young woman had reminded him of something he had forgotten: humanity, simplicity, and the power of real emotion. When Clara reached the final notes, the music faded into silence. No one spoke. The room felt heavy with feeling, as if everyone was afraid to break the spell. Then slowly applause began. It grew louder, fuller, until the whole room was standing. Tears shone in many eyes, including Roland's. Clara stood and gave a small bow. Her cheeks flushed. She could hardly believe what she had done. The same piano that once felt like a burden had become her voice. She looked up and saw Roland clapping, not with pride, but with deep respect. After the event, guests came to her one by one, thanking her, praising her, asking if she had ever recorded her music. She smiled politely, still trying to absorb it all. When everyone began to leave, Roland approached her quietly. "You did more than just play tonight," he said. "You reminded people what true beauty feels like." Clara smiled softly. "Thank you, sir. It means a lot," he nodded. "You've come a long way from that first night." "I still remember how scared I was," she said, laughing lightly. "And yet you turned fear into art," he replied. "That's rare." He paused for a moment before continuing. "I'd like to help you more, Clara. If you're willing, I can introduce you to people in the music world, people who can give you a platform." Clara hesitated. It sounded like a dream, but she had learned not to chase things blindly. "That's very kind of you," she said, "but I just want to take it one step at a time. I'm not ready for something big yet." Roland smiled approvingly. "That's wise. Take your time. But know that when you're ready, the door is open." That night, when Clara returned home, her mother and brother were waiting for her, eager to hear how it went. She told them everything: the applause, the smiles, the feeling of freedom she felt when she played. Her brother hugged her tightly. "You're going to be famous one day," he said. Clara laughed and shook her head. "I just want to make people feel something when they listen. That's enough for me." As she sat by the window that night watching the city lights flicker, she realized how far she had come. A few months ago, she was just another tired waitress, invisible to the world. But now, through one simple act of courage and one song from her heart, she had changed everything. And deep down she knew this was only the beginning of her story. The night after her emotional performance, the young waitress couldn't sleep. Her fingers still tingled from touching the keys, and her mind kept replaying the stunned faces in the restaurant. The billionaire's eyes, once sharp and full of pride, had softened for a moment before turning cold again. She wondered if he had really been moved or if it was just her imagination. The next morning, she returned to her usual routine. The restaurant was quieter than usual, almost as if everyone was still thinking about what had happened. When she walked in, a few of the other workers gave her small smiles and someone whispered, "That song last night. It was something else." She smiled back shyly, not sure what to say. Music had always been her escape, not something she showed to others. But last night had changed everything. As she began setting tables, she noticed the restaurant manager approaching her. He looked nervous, his hands fidgeting with a folded piece of paper. "There's a message for you," he said, handing it to her. She took it with hesitation and unfolded it slowly. The paper had a short note written in elegant handwriting. "Meet me at the private hall at 7 p.m. I.D." Her heart skipped. Danya could only mean one person, the billionaire. For a moment she considered ignoring it. But curiosity and a strange pull inside her wouldn't let her. All day she tried to stay focused, but her thoughts kept drifting. What could he want from her now? To mock her again? Or maybe to apologize? She wasn't sure which idea scared her more. By evening she found herself standing outside the private hall, the same place where the grand piano sat. The soft glow of the chandeliers spilled onto the hallway. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The billionaire was already there, sitting by the piano with a glass of wine in his hand. He didn't look at her immediately. He seemed lost in thought. "You came," he said after a pause, his tone calm but distant. "I got your note," she replied softly. "You wanted to see me?" He nodded and gestured to the chair beside the piano. "Sit." She hesitated but obeyed. The silence between them was heavy, filled only by the faint hum of the air conditioner. Finally he said, "Last night, you surprised me. I didn't think you had that kind of talent." She frowned slightly. "You forced me to play. I didn't really have a choice." He chuckled faintly, swirling the wine in his glass. "True, but sometimes people need a little push to reveal what they're hiding." Her hands tightened in her lap. "I wasn't hiding anything, I didn't think it mattered." He looked at her then. Really looked. It always matters when someone carries that much emotion in their hands. You played like someone who has lived through pain. She didn't know how to respond. Her throat felt tight. "Music helps me forget," she said finally. "It's the only thing that ever did." The billionaire studied her for a long time, then said quietly, "I used to play too. A long time ago. Before all this." He gestured vaguely around the luxurious room. "Before money made everything loud." She blinked, surprised. "You played?" He nodded slowly. "My mother taught me. She said music was the only thing that made people equal. Rich or poor, when you play from your heart, everyone listens the same way." His voice grew softer. "I lost her when I was young. After that, I stopped playing." The room grew still. The young woman felt something shift in her chest. For the first time, she saw not the billionaire everyone feared, but a lonely man carrying his own silent wounds. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. He looked away, his jaw tight. "Don't be. I buried that part of myself a long time ago. But last night, when you played, I felt something I haven't felt in years." He turned back to her. "I want you to play again." She stared at him, unsure she had heard right. "Again? Now?" "Yes, but this time play for yourself. Not for me. Not for anyone else. Just you." Her heart pounded. Slowly she nodded and moved toward the piano. Her fingers trembled as they hovered above the keys. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. This time it wasn't a sad song or a desperate cry. It was a quiet melody full of warmth and hope. It spoke of small joys, of morning sunlight, of new beginnings. When she finished, she opened her eyes to see him standing beside her, silent. His face was unreadable. Then, to her surprise, he said, "That was beautiful." "Thank you," she whispered, unsure what else to say. He set his glass down and said, "You don't belong here, waiting tables. You should be performing, studying, making music." She shook her head. "That's impossible. I can't afford it." He studied her again, his eyes thoughtful. "What if you could?" She looked up, confused. What do you mean? I want to help you, he said simply. I can arrange for you to study music properly. A real academy. With the best teachers. Her eyes widened. You're serious? Completely. She didn't know what to say. Her dreams had always seemed out of reach, and now, in this strange twist of fate, the man who once humiliated her was offering to make them real. Why? She asked softly. Why would you do that for me? He paused. Maybe I see something of myself in you. Or maybe I'm just trying to fix something I broke. She felt a lump in her throat. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, he replied. She nodded slowly. I will. He stood up, his expression softer than she had ever seen. Good, that's all I ask. When she left the hall that night, her mind was spinning. The city lights outside seemed brighter, the air fresher. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different life, a life where music wasn't just an escape, but a future. But as the days passed, she couldn't shake a strange unease. She didn't know why, but something about his offer felt too good to be true. She kept wondering what his real intentions were. Was this kindness, guilt, or something else entirely? One evening, after another long shift, she found a small envelope left on her locker. Inside was a single ticket to a concert in the city's Grand Hall, with a short note. Come see what music can become. Signed again with just a D. She stood there holding the ticket, her heart racing. She didn't know what awaited her, but something told her this was only the beginning of a much deeper story. One that would test not just her talent, but her courage, her trust, and the power of her own voice. The night of the concert arrived faster than she expected. The waitress stood outside the Grand Hall, clutching the ticket in her hand, her heart beating fast. The lights were dazzling, and people in elegant clothes streamed inside, talking excitedly. She felt completely out of place in her simple dress and worn shoes, but something inside told her to go in. She took a deep breath and stepped through the tall doors. Inside, the hall was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers glowed softly above hundreds of seats arranged in perfect rows. The air was filled with a quiet anticipation, the kind that only comes before music begins. She found her seat near the back and tried to blend in, but she couldn't stop staring at the grand piano on stage. It shone under the light like something alive. She was still looking at it when she saw him. The billionaire entered quietly from the side, dressed in a simple black suit. No crowd followed him, no camera lights flashed. He walked straight to his seat near the stage and sat down without a word. For a moment she thought he might turn and see her, but he didn't. He seemed focused, almost tense. The orchestra began to play softly, filling the hall with smooth notes that wrapped around every corner. Then the soloist appeared, a young pianist with confident eyes. He greeted the audience with a polite nod before sitting down at the piano. When his fingers touched the keys, everything else disappeared. The sound was powerful, full of emotion, the kind of music that seemed to tell stories without words. She sat frozen, listening. Every note felt like a wave, rising and falling, carrying her somewhere deep inside herself. The audience was completely silent, breathing as one. Even the billionaire seemed moved, his usually calm face showing faint emotion. As the final note faded, the hall erupted in applause. The pianist stood and bowed, smiling humbly. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. The billionaire was one of the last to clap, but when he did, it was slow, steady, and genuine. When the applause ended, the billionaire rose and left quietly. The waitress hesitated but followed him outside. She caught up to him near the steps leading to his car. Wait, she called softly. He turned, surprised to see her. You came. I did, she said. That was incredible. I've never heard anything like it. He nodded slightly. That pianist started just like you, working in a small cafe, playing whenever he could. Someone gave him a chance. She looked at him curiously. And now you're giving me one? Only if you want it, he said. But understand it won't be easy. Music at that level takes everything from you. Time, energy, emotion. You'll need to leave your old life behind. She swallowed hard. I'm not afraid of hard work. I've been working hard my whole life, but this is different. He nodded again, studying her face. You have the heart for it. That's rare. There was a pause. The streetlights flickered softly around them. Then he said, if you accept, the academy will expect you next month. I've already spoken to them. They're willing to take you as a special student, She stared at him, overwhelmed. You already arranged it? I don't do things halfway, he said quietly. Her hands trembled slightly. She looked down at the ground, then back at him. I don't know what to say. Say yes, he said simply. She smiled faintly, a tear slipping down her cheek. Then yes. His face softened for the first time. Good. Then your real journey begins now. The following weeks felt like a dream. The billionaire handled everything. The paperwork, the fees, even her living arrangements near the academy. She wanted to refuse his money, but he insisted. Think of it as an investment, he said, not charity. The day she moved into the small room near the academy, she sat on her bed looking at the piano practice schedule pinned to the wall. It was intense, 8 hours of practice daily, lessons, theory, and performances. But instead of fear, she felt excitement. This was what she had always wanted, though she never dared to imagine it. The first few days were hard. Her fingers ached and her mind felt heavy with new information. Her teachers were strict but fair. One of them, an elderly woman with kind eyes, noticed her struggle and said, Music is not about perfection. It's about honesty. Don't play to impress, play to speak. Those words stayed with her. Every evening she practiced until her hands were sore. Sometimes she'd close her eyes and remember the restaurant, the clinking of glasses, the sound of people talking over her music. Now it was different. Here every note mattered. Every mistake taught her something. The billionaire visited only once in those first few weeks. He came quietly during a lesson, standing near the door as she played. When she finished, he said nothing for a long moment, then just nodded. Keep going, he said before leaving. That small moment meant more to her than any speech could. Months passed. Her playing improved faster than anyone expected. She poured her heart into every note, every phrase, but deep down she knew she wasn't just chasing music. She was chasing a feeling, something she couldn't name, something that connected her to him, to her past, to everything she had lost and found again. One rainy evening, after practice, she found herself walking through the city, her thoughts heavy. She passed by a cafe with soft music playing inside and stopped. Through the window, she saw a young man playing piano, his eyes closed, a smile on his face. The scene made her heart ache, reminding her of the simplicity she once knew. She walked in and sat quietly, listening. When he finished, she clapped softly and he smiled back, surprised. Do you play? He asked. She nodded. A little. Would you like to? He offered, standing up. Her first instinct was to refuse, but something in his kindness reminded her of the night that changed her life. She nodded and sat at the piano. Her fingers rested on the keys and she began to play a gentle melody, something between a lullaby and a memory. The room grew quiet. Even the rain outside seemed to slow. When she finished, there was silence. Then the small crowd in the cafe began to clap, softly at first, then louder. She smiled, tears in her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't playing to prove anything. She was just playing for herself, for the music, for everyone who had ever listened with an open heart. Later that night, as she walked home, her phone buzzed. It was a message from the billionaire. I heard from your teacher today. She says you're becoming someone the world will remember. She smiled at the screen, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. She typed back, I'm just trying to make music that feels true. After a pause, another message appeared. That's exactly what makes it unforgettable. She put her phone away, her heart full. The rain had stopped and the moon peeked through the clouds. She looked up, whispering softly to herself, maybe this is what I was meant to do all along. But deep down, she also knew the story wasn't over. The path ahead was still long, and the final test of her strength and her music was yet to come. The months turned into a year, and every day brought the young pianist closer to something she couldn't yet define. Her skills grew sharper, her confidence deeper, but more than anything, her understanding of music changed. It was no longer about notes or techniques. It was about feeling, about life itself. Every sound she made carried pieces of her story. The loneliness, the struggle, the moments of quiet joy. Her teachers saw it, the audience felt it, and somewhere deep down she finally began to believe in herself. The billionaire continued to check in from time to time, though rarely in person. He preferred to stay in the background, quietly watching her progress through letters and short messages. She had grown used to his distance. It didn't bother her anymore. She had learned that some people show care not through words but through the spaces they leave open for others to grow. Then, one afternoon, as she was finishing her practice, her teacher entered the room with a small envelope. "This came for you," she said, handing it over with a knowing smile. Inside was an invitation to perform at a special charity concert, a night organized by the same billionaire who had once forced her to play in front of a crowd. The event would raise funds for children who couldn't afford music education. The moment she read it, her heart stopped for a second. It felt like a full circle, as if life had brought her back to where it all began. The letter ended with a single line: "I believe the world deserves to hear your song." Signed, as always, with just a D. For days, she couldn't think of anything else. The memory of that night in the restaurant replayed in her mind. The humiliation, the trembling hands, the silence that followed her song. But now it was different. This time she would play because she wanted to. Not for approval, not to prove anything, but because she finally understood what her father once meant when he said music can make people listen without words. The night of the concert came quietly, but carried a weight she could feel in her chest. The hall was enormous, filled with faces from every walk of life. She stood backstage in her simple gown, clutching her fingers together to stop them from shaking. Her teacher placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and whispered, "Remember, you are not performing tonight. You are sharing." Those words calmed her. She took a slow breath and stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, but she didn't look at the crowd. Her eyes went straight to the piano. For a moment she just stood there, letting the silence settle. Then she sat down and rested her fingers on the keys. The first notes came soft and hesitant, like a whisper. The melody was the same one she had played that night in the restaurant, the one her father had called "The Light in You." But this time the music was fuller, richer. Every sound carried not just sadness but strength, not just pain but hope. As she played, she felt the weight of every moment that brought her here. The endless nights at the restaurant, the laughter she once endured, the billionaire's mocking challenge, and the second chance that followed. The memories didn't hurt anymore. They flowed through her hands like water, turning into music that filled the room with something too deep for words. Slowly she began to hear the crowd quiet down. The room that had been filled with murmurs and soft movement now sat completely still. Not a sound. It was as if time had paused. She didn't look up, but she could feel it, the same silence she once created years ago. Only this time she wasn't trembling. She was alive, powerful, free. When the final note faded, there was a long moment of stillness. Then the applause came. It started softly, then grew louder and louder until the entire hall was on its feet. She looked up, tears in her eyes, and saw faces glowing with emotion. Somewhere near the back she spotted the billionaire. He wasn't clapping wildly like the rest. He just stood there, his hands folded, his eyes glistening in quiet pride. After the concert, she met him backstage. He was waiting for her, looking older than she remembered, but there was warmth in his smile. "You played beautifully," he said softly. "Thank you," she replied, "for everything. For believing when no one else did." He shook his head slightly. "You believed first. I just gave you a chance to show it." She smiled. "You changed my life." He looked down, thoughtful. "You changed mine too. That night I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Real emotion. You reminded me that all the money and success in the world mean nothing if you forget how to feel." There was a silence between them, full of mutual respect and gratitude. "What will you do now?" he asked. She looked at her hands, still warm from playing. "Keep going. Keep playing. I want to teach children who can't afford music lessons. I want to give them what I almost lost." He smiled softly. "Then my foundation will support that." "It's time for you to lead." She blinked, surprised. "Me? Who better?" he said. "You understand what it means to start from nothing. You'll make them believe." Her heart swelled. "I'll do it," she said. "But not for money, not for fame. For the music." "Exactly," he said with a small nod. "For the music." Months later, her small music program opened in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city. It wasn't fancy, just a few rooms with old instruments and bright walls covered in children's drawings. But every day, laughter and melodies filled the space. Children from poor families came in shy and unsure, just like she once was, and left smiling, their hands eager to touch the keys. Sometimes, when the sun set and the rooms emptied, She would sit by the window, looking out at the city lights. She often thought of her father, of the first piano they had owned, and of the song that changed everything. She played it sometimes softly as a reminder of where it all began. One evening, as she was locking up, she received a call from an unknown number. When she answered, a familiar voice greeted her. "You still playing that same song?" The billionaire asked, a faint smile in his tone. "Always," she said. "It's part of me now." "I'm glad," he said. "Keep it alive. The world needs people who play from the heart." They talked for a few minutes about the school, the children, the future. Before hanging up, he said quietly, "I'm proud of you." When the call ended, she sat in silence for a long moment. The night outside was peaceful, the stars faint but steady. She felt tears rise but smiled through them. Life had come full circle, and every struggle had led her to this moment. A year later, she was invited to perform again, this time as a guest artist. She accepted, but not for fame or recognition. She wanted to play one more time to show the children that dreams could be real. As she stepped onto the same grand stage, she looked at the audience and thought of the girl she once was. The waitress with trembling hands. The girl who almost gave up on her music. She sat at the piano, smiled softly, and began to play. The melody drifted through the hall like a warm breeze. People listened in silence, their eyes shining with emotion. When the final note faded, the audience stood and clapped again. But this time, she didn't just hear the sound of applause. She heard her father's laughter, her teacher's voice, the billionaire's quiet encouragement, all blending into one memory. And as she stood to bow, she whispered softly to herself, "Sometimes, all it takes is one song to remind the world who you are." The lights glowed softly above her, and for a moment everything felt still. The girl who once served tables was gone. In her place stood a musician whose music carried hope, love, and strength. The song that had once silenced a room had now awakened the world.